All right, y'all. I'm gonna make a quick video on GCF. So when you are factoring GCF, we know is the greatest common factor. So what we're looking for here when you have your expression, in this case, we have two terms for this first one. And what I'm trying to figure out is what is the biggest number that can divide into both of them. So obviously for this one, it's a little bit easier, but we know we can divide both of these by 5. Okay. Now, something you can do is you can say divide by 5, but what you're dividing by is going to move out in front. As you divide, you'll get what's remaining. In this case, we get x plus 4. So this is the factor form for number 1. Okay, here, looking at 12 and 20, trying to figure out what can I divide both of them by. Now, I can divide by 2. Okay, but we want the greatest common factor. Now, here's what happens. Say if I divide by 2 because I'm like, I don't quite know my times tables like that, and I end up with this. Your goal is to look on the inside and say, can I divide further? And if you can, that means you did not take out the GCF, okay? So in this case, we did not take out the entire GCF. So I'm going to look at this and go, okay, I could divide this by 2 again. And so now that means we have another 2 that's going to move out in front. And we're left with 3x minus 5, which means 4, and then 3x minus 5 would be our answer. Now, that's obviously a long way to do that, okay? But now in this case, I had to do this, multiple steps, but I can do this a little bit shorter if I knew my times tables. And so if I have the original expression, and I say, okay, what can I divide 12 and 20 by? Going through our times tables, I can divide both of these by 4. 4 times 3 is 12, 4 times 5 is 20. That is the biggest thing that I can divide both of them by. And so that's why we try to do the greatest common factor as quick as we can. But worst case scenario, you just do it multiple times and just take out something. You will always get to the final result at the end. Okay. Now, for number 3, we have this trinomial. And so now we're going to look at all 3 of these to determine what can we divide by. Okay, so in this case, I'm looking at this, and my first thing would always be look at the smallest number, because you can't divide by more than what the smallest number is allowed to give you, which means I can divide 3 by 3. And then I go through the rest of these, and yes, I can divide the others by 3, which means what's left will be 2x squared minus 8x. And then 3 divided by 3 is not 0, it's 1. Okay. All right, here, last one. If I'm dividing, or if I'm looking at an expression and my leading term has a negative, like this -4, then I want to divide not only by the greatest common factor numerically, I also want to divide by that negative. When you factor, you want your leading term to be positive. It's going to make the factoring a lot easier. All right, so we're going to divide. Let's see, I can divide. Well, here's the thing. So the smallest number is 4. I can divide 4 by 4. I can divide 8 by 4, but I can't divide 14 by 4. That doesn't work, right? So that means I need to go and rethink, what can I divide by? In this case, it's only 2. Now, because of the negative, I'm also going to divide by a -2. And then what's going to happen answer-wise is I'm going to end up with a -2 in front. So now negative divided by negative is going to leave us with positive 2x squared. Now, positive 8 divided by -2 is -4. It changes that sign. And then negative 14 divided by -2 is positive 7. Okay, and that is our GCF. Now, let me just create one real quick. So now if I had an example, sometimes I can have a GCF that involves variables. Those are a little bit easier. You're dealing with variables. So let's say if I go with 6x to the third, 14x. Yeah, we'll do that. All right, so when I look at this, I'm able to divide both of these by a 2. But also now when I look at it, I say, oh, they both have variables in common. So greatest common factor could be a variable as well. And so if I look at this, both of these have an x. It's just that this one actually has x to the third. So it technically has 3 x's. And then this one only has 1 x. So when I look to see what they have in common, they only have 1 x in common with each other. So I can only take out one of those x's. All right, so that means our answer will be a 2x for the GCF. I divide normally, 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now, if I divide one of the x's out and move it in front, that means I'm only left with x squared on the inside now, and then minus 7. And then since I divided the x out in front, I don't need to put the x on the 7. All right, so that's just a quick GCF video. All right, bye.